Hello, this is Sarika. Um, I am a spirit healer, and I heal using light language and music and sound and all that good stuff. However, this video I want to talk about emotions and emotional states as sort of mechanisms of purification. I have always been very uncomfortable with emotion because I think I was an exceptionally emotional child, and that was never received well, and so I learned to just ignore it. And then it took me until like my late 20s to actually really be able to just go inside my body and know how I was feeling, you know? Uh, and it does have to do a lot with the body. Um, and I think that emotions Uh, the new age is very fond of simple phrases that don't have much meaning, and a lot of people like to say emotion is just energy in motion, and that's true, but it also misses a lot of other important points. It's not just energy in motion, it's energy trying to be in motion that we usually interrupt and latch onto with our minds. Emotion is a mental thing as much as it is a physical thing, as much as it is a heart thing. I mean, what is the heart in this case? It's not the physical heart, and yet we still, even in our weird, scientific-y, Western-y way, acknowledge the fact that there is this essentially emotional body or emotional space where things happen, where emotions happen. And we call it, oh, that's the heart, and then the mind is all the rational stuff, and we separate those two. Um, that's exceptionally incorrect. You know that if you have something in your head and then someone says something or does something against that, or that butts up against it, or contrary to it, or whatever, or that offends you in some way, are you offended? Is it because your heart just holds all of these things as true and real and just lets, that's how you know it's up here. It's all up here, not just up here, and I'm just doing that because that's when we think of things and we think of thinking of things, we think of the head, you know? Your beliefs create your emotional reactions to things. That emotion is not just real because it's true and is, self-existent or extant in some realm somewhere like a platonic idea. It's your mind influencing the energy of your body. And the energy or dynamic life force energy, or kundalini, if you want to call it that, moving through your body, or spirit up here, pretty much the same thing, just coming through, just a different direction, and things are coming through, and then a belief structure gets in the way, and then you have physical and emotional reactions to it. That's what's going on here. Okay. Um, Now, that's why I think I've always been, because I've always been up here, and so I was really cut off from body stuff and from emotional stuff, um, and didn't learn until much later how to actually go inside my body and start to feel these things. Then I started to realize that when I would have these emotional reactions, I could feel it. You feel it. Like when something's just wrong to you, say we feel it in our gut. And that's also somehow related to intuition, which I haven't figured out quite yet. It really is what we call intuition, is usually just being smart and leaping ahead and making inferences. Look it up. Um, Knowing things, having experience, and then you have all these patterns laid out, and then something else happens that comes into your experience, and you're like, oh, I know what's going to happen. That's intuition. Like, that's what most people call intuition. I don't think that that's what we really mean when we say intuition. What we mean is like this higher opening and this understanding, this being receptive to information in almost like a psychic way, you know, like we would say, ooh, someone's psychic or whatever, or has these impressions. Intuition has always been like a very fuzzy concept to me. I don't think that's what you mean. I think you mean you're making logical inferences. Be smart, you know, it's not that hard. Think about things and read stuff and try to solve logic puzzles. So I don't know why I started talking about that. Anyway, I started realizing that all of these things have actual physical places, and I realized that very often the things that would upset me the most would cut something off down here, usually like towards the solar plexus, and then all of the top of me would start to get hot, especially if I was offended by something or I thought someone was offended by me. It started to really affect me internally, and I could tell what was going on. All of a sudden, it was like, because I was also developing at the same time in my spiritual practices and whatnot, the ability to move energy in my body and paying attention to that kind of stuff, all of a sudden it was like, I know where these things are in my body, and so if I can identify them in my body, then I can start to heal them or move them, or allow them to move through me. And as they do that, the mental blockages and beliefs and things that are getting in the way can be cleared out. So what this video is about is, after all of that, is attempting to use, or let's not say attempting, using emotions in a powerful, visceral, energetic way, spiritual way, and also psychological way in our everyday lives in order to better um, better cope, I suppose, because we are suffering from an onslaught of useless information all the time. And I don't think it's going to be useless necessarily in the end. I think this is adding to the collective consciousness. There's always a lot of crap in the collective consciousness. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily always crap. It just continues to grow and expand and grow and expand, and we sort through it eventually. It's just that it's difficult to do so while it's happening. And so when we go out in public too, it's just trying, like, be here, be where I am, on top of a hill, on top of a mountain, amongst a bunch of mountains, where there's a forest and snow and silence, and then go to a city. And you know exactly what I mean. It's like, so you're like a caveman in one of those weird, you know, time displacement movies that where you know, he's suddenly, all of a sudden, you know, in New York, in Times Square or whatever, and all of this stuff. It's like, this is a nightmare to people who have not experienced that kind of stuff. It doesn't make any sense. That's how I feel a lot of the time. And I think a lot of you do too, or if you don't really, you don't know that you do until you get away from it. Like, honestly, you know? And so you need to. But it's really hard to when you live in like an urban environment, you know? So being relaxed is exceptionally important. And you should do that before you try to do any of this kind of stuff. But I think that that's part of the physical component. You have to be relaxed to be able to, like, get in and first sense. If you're tense, you can't sense anything in your body. And if you're relaxed, you can sense everything. Not only can you sense everything, but you can start to move it. And if you can start to move things in your body, you can learn to in/evoke emotion. Evoke means make something in the external environment appear, and voke for voice, vocal, etc., vocative, or whatever. And usually it was an utterance, whereas invoke is something that you have inside of yourself, and you know, it's either like you're invoking with like a mantra or a spell or like just an idea, an intention, and something occurs inside of you as opposed to outside. Evoke, invoke. Um, However, macrocosm and microcosm, baby, they're the same friggin' thing. If you have one ability to do that, to use your will and your intention to move energy, that's the basis of it. Mind, intention moves energy. Yi moves energy. Um, and therefore, Yi, intention, mind can move emotion and use those emotions, positive emotional states, to purify the body and to purify the mind and to purify the heart. These are spaces, right? The things in between, like the emotions and the thoughts and the energies or whatever in between those spaces, that's, well, those are the things in between those spaces. But these spaces in general are not just spaces. They have a lot of things going on, obviously. I'm sure your mind has a lot of things going on. If it's completely still, please give me your secrets. Um, Everyone has that. Everyone has a lot of stuff going on in here. And then, like I said, the external environment, and we're going crazy all the time. So, but now, if you have this one ability to move energy, you can start to evoke or invoke both things same time, is do, have, be, um, positive emotional states, and clear out those spaces which are messy and not very polished. Um, I find that the Akadua is incredibly effective at this work. Because of my work with the Akadua, I have gotten much closer to the body. Because of my work with the Akadua, I have seen how messy these spaces are. And sometimes it's like if you could imagine the brain as an energetic, glowing matrix of lines and balls of light and things. Just, use your new age imagination, and you'll see it. It's like an Alex Gray painting or something. And it's all wonderful, except there's like all these tiny little connections. And when the Akadua gets in there, it's like it goes, nope, these 17,000 connections, that's one space now. These other 3,000 connections, that's one space now. It's like everything gets very like large and broad and still. Whereas we're like all this stuff, like even I'll do my internal energy circulations, I'll do Nei Gong, and like, wow, this is it, this is like I'm so close to the body. Oh yeah, and I'm doing the water wheel, and I can feel the energy and the Amrita, as they would call it in the, yogic tradition, starting to down, and it comes down, and I can taste it on my tongue, and it moves down my, and I'm physically feeling all this stuff, and it's so clear. And then I'll just decide for whatever reason, you know what, I'm going to do the same water wheel thing with the Akadua, and it's like, whoa, oh God, I guess my body is all the way out here too. And these like tiny little connections that we're doing, very important to do that kind of stuff. Yet at the same time, when we have something like the Akadua, which is like this enlightened, expanded energy, um, you start to realize that humans are very messy, tangled, sensitive creatures. And it is through the continual processes of things like Negong, internal circulations, meditation, yoga, the real yogas, union, that create something like the Akadua, because the Akadua, it's been around, you know, it's been through the system internally, it's been through the energy bodies that could be termed external or whatever, to the physical matrix. It's gone into the evolutionary matrix of the earth and the sun and the planets and all of this, and the moon and all of this craziness. And we're like sitting here, gotta do these circulations. Oh yeah, it's the stuff, and it is. But when we have something like that, it can expand. Anyway, now I'm just talking about the Akadua. Because of that work, um, I've gotten so close to the emotional states. Everything I said before. I've gotten so close to the body and the emotional states too that I started to realize that um, The Akadewa, it creates spaces for those emotions to flow in a positive way. So I guess creating that space is probably one of the most important things, and then the other most important thing is being able to move it. So I would just suggest that you go into any space. If you work with the chakras, you can use the chakras and physically try, there's that word try again, physically intend to invoke wherever you feel good feelings. Go inside the body and find out if you want to. Start thinking about something that makes you really, really happy or excited, and then see what's going on in your body. If you can't feel anything, you know you need to do more. If you can't feel anything, you know that there are things that are blocked, and it's not just blockage, blockage, blockage. Sometimes it's just an idea, or we just don't even notice. Like, oh, yeah, I do feel that in my body right there. Interesting. Go, sense, encourage with the mind, feel more and more and more and more and more, and you will find that those emotions, the positive ones especially, compassion, gratefulness, forgiveness can be a sort of emotional state. To be in that state of forgiveness where you're forgiving yourself, you're forgiving other people, reflect these emotions back. It's all again in the mind, all the intention, all of that. Whether or not you want to use this emotion to purify your own self or to purify others, you know. I used to think again it was like ridiculous to focus on something like compassion. It just didn't make any sense to me because I didn't understand what real meditation was. I was just thinking, oh, you're just going to focus on some, you know, like fluffy feelings of love and compassion or whatever. That's stupid. I want God awareness. I want bliss. I want cosmic stuff happening. Like, come on, you know. And I had no idea that these emotional spaces are that. They're spaces, they're energies, and they have, I mean, as a like a bodhisattva of compassion, like Kuan Yin or something. I mean, she is compassion, and compassion is her. And there's no her. You know, it's like it's just it's a being of compassion. That space of compassion. Imagine that space holding a being inside of it. You know, it's like, whoa. I thought this was just an emotional thing that's happening inside of the body. It is, but they're iterations or echoes or suggestions of the God stuff. All right? And again, like when people talk about love, it's not that puppy love butterfly feeling that you get when you see so and so. That's not bliss. That's not Ananda. I'm talking about completely being enwrapped in God and unable to move or think anything other than God is bliss, is love, is me, is bliss, is love. You know, it's not these little fluffy states. But the fluffy states are there to remind us. They're there to get us to, and then we get the deeper things, which is not just the fluffy stuff, and we actually connect with someone, and it's like this, you know, big thing going on. Um, or we connect with ourselves, and we realize that there's much, 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 much more to all of this. And those states, again, can be incredibly purifying. I would suggest, personally, I just love the model of the Dantian. So you have the lower Dantian, which is like physical energy and physical body, and the middle Dantian, which is like mind, heart, body, and physical energy, like chi that really needs to flow out of and in through your organs and stuff like that, and which is emotion. Organs are emotion, you know, in the physical sense. That's what those are. And then the upper dantian, which is like the spirit, mind, heart, heart, mind, spirit, heart, mind, um, and has the higher function, whatever, and that's great. And focus your emotions, whichever ones, all of them. Gratefulness, or gratitude. That's a better word for it. Gratitude, being thankful, thankfulness, compassion. That's kind of a difficult concept to get into, and we have the concept, and so it's like, what are we doing? Are we like feeling this feeling of compassion? Try to, once you identify where the feeling is in your body, and you usually have to do it this way, and you get used to evoking it on purpose and like feeling that feeling on purpose and encouraging the physical feeling. You might feel like some tense things, like energy starts to pool, and like oh god, like, it's because you're starting to connect things in your body, and when you connect your mind and your intention to those feelings, they start to become more real and become more intense. All right? So, yeah, I could go into something right now. So then once you start to do that process, then you really start to intend for those things to be in different places. This is where the alchemy comes into it. And when you're working with a model like the Dantians, you just go into the lower Dantian and feel compassion in your belly. You can do it. You can push that stuff, even though this is usually where you feel that kind of stuff, and it's, ephemeral and moving around, and you're not sure, and it's kind of stuck. Eventually, you can evoke or invoke compassion in your lower Dantian. You can invoke or evoke compersion in your upper Dantian. And when you have these states, you start to see them in different ways, you start to perceive them in different ways, because each center has a different way of relating to that. It's not just focused where you usually feel it, it's everywhere. And again, it's just a reflection of the greater whole. And so these are the little feelings. These are the little ones that we usually have, and sometimes not so little, I realize that. But then once we start to work with them, they get bigger and more intense, and then things start to clear out. Physical way, energetic way. And I would love for you to attempt to do that. Attempt to evoke these emotions in these spaces. I don't know how much further to go unless I was to talk about specifically using intention or yi or the mind, your little mind laser, to make things happen inside of you or outside of you. That's what it's all about. The intention, it can't even really be thought of as in the head or in the mind. It's just that's the way we think of it. There are some cultures on this planet even today that think of their mind in their stomach. Why do you think of your mind in your head? It's because we're attached to these stupid ideas about brains, and then language, Superior Warflow, shapes the way our reality works. So yeah, I love you guys. I hope that helped. I hope it wasn't confusing. Let me know, and do the thing.